It's disgraceful for the UN to submit to the demands of a regime like Maliki's and ultimately to close its eyes to the fact that really what they're doing is submitting to the demands of the Iranian mullahs, and Maliki is just a puppet on a string doing the bidding of the Iranian mullahs. And it's outrageous for the UN to do this. But it's not unusual for the UN to do this. It should be ashamed of having that charter, which stands for some of the most beautiful and wonderful sentiments of the human spirit. And if it stands by now, it should be completely ashamed of itself. Maybe it can be shamed into acting. This is so simple. It's so easy. People at Ashraf were promised by the American government and ultimately by the Iraqi government they'd be dealt with humanely and decently. That's not so hard. We're in the 21st century. We're not in the Middle Ages. Not so hard to live up to that. It's not so hard to have the courage if you're the UN High Commissioner on Refugees. Yeah, not just Commissioner, but you're the High Commissioner. Not so hard to have the courage to stand up and say, it's inhumane, indecent, and unjust to take 3,300 people and put them in half a square kilometer. It's unjust not to give them bathroom facilities. It's unjust not to give them showers. This takes courage to do this? Or does it take just a teeny bit of human decency to do this? Like a teeny bit of human decency. And just a little bit of bravery. Not much, just a little bit. And the worst part of this, and I'm embarrassed to say it, is that my government stands aside and watches this. We stood up with strength. We didn't accommodate. We didn't appease. We did that, and it brought us World War II, the era of Chamberlain and appeasement. Finally, we stood up. The UN didn't stand up. The United States stood up. The United Kingdom stood up to Russia and to the Soviets and said, no more talk. Now we're going to have action. We're not going to allow you to oppress people any longer. We're going to stand with the people who are oppressed. We're going to stand up. And that's what we need now. And the United Nations has to do it. But the United States has to do it even more, because we can't count on the United Nations. We've been able to count on the United States up until now, but we haven't been able to count on the United Nations for 40 years. So, it's about time that my government take a leadership role, because if my government doesn't take a leadership role, I'm afraid that all our calls to the United Nations will mean nothing, because they've ignored these calls before. And here's simply what has to be done. One, the United States should delist the MEK today. It's easy to do. It's easy to do, not hard, not precedent setting. The UK has done it. European Union has done it. Some of the people involved in originally recommending the decision say it was wrong. Some of them have now come out and said they were opposed to listing them as a terrorist order way back at the time that it was done. And that's way back in history. We now have a history of an organization that stands for a peaceful solution, a non-nuclear Iran. We have an organization that stands for a secular government in Iran, and a government that will get along with countries all around the world. There's only one country that now agrees with us about this. The UK disagrees with us. The European Union disagrees with us. There's only one country that agrees with the United States about remaining as a listing the MEK as a terrorist organization. One country agrees with us. Iran. Gee, that should tell you something that we're wrong, right? It has to be delisted, and it's critical, because this listing is used by Maliki and others to kill people. This listing is deadly. It has mortal consequences. It's not just a technical listing. You just read the press releases and the press statements after the attack a few months ago. How did he defend it? He defended it by saying, this is a terrorist group recognized by all international organizations. Well, of course, Maliki was lying, it's not recognized by all international organizations. In fact, it's not recognized by any international organizations but two, the United States and Iran. But it has to be delisted. That would take away this ability to oppress without people understanding the consequences of what's being done. The second thing that has to be done is the United States of America has to stand up with our allies, and we have to have the courage to be for regime change in Iran. If we had to change the regime in Egypt, if we had to change the regime in Libya, if we have to change the regime in Syria, well, my goodness, Iran is so much worse. And it's so much more necessary for the people you love and care about, for the people we love and care about, and for the whole world to have a regime in Iran that is not a theocratic dictatorship that has taken so many lives. It is tragic to look at the book that Madame Rajavi has sitting at her desk, the Red Book.